I returned from 12 years of Black Ops missions to find my mother serving cocktails at a poolside party in the waterfront mansion I bought her. She looked at me with clouded eyes and asked if I was here to fix the air conditioning. She didn't recognize the Navy SEAL standing in front of her. She didn't know that the man in the contractor's uniform had $80 million in cryptocurrency and a burning need to destroy the people who stole her life. My name is Michael Reed. I'm 62 years old. For the last 12 years, I've been operating in places that don't exist on maps, doing things the government will never acknowledge. I survived IEDs in Fallujah, firefights in Mogadishu, and a helicopter crash in the mountains of Afghanistan. I came home with more scars than skin and a purple heart I'll never wear. But none of that prepared me for what I found when I walked up the driveway of 2847 Ocean Boulevard, La Jolla, California. I had purchased this property 15 years ago, cash, after my first major contract payout. $6.8 million for 8,000 square feet of pure California dream. White stucco walls, Spanish tile roof, infinity pool overlooking the Pacific. I bought it for my mother, Emma Reed, the woman who raised me alone after Dad died when I was 7. I bought it so she could spend her final years in comfort, so she could watch the sunset from the terrace, where we used to eat ice cream when I was a kid visiting the beach. I had called ahead. I told my brother Daniel that I was coming home. He sounded surprised, almost panicked. He said Mom was doing great, that the house was perfect, that everything was exactly as I left it. He said he'd been taking care of her, managing the property, making sure she wanted for nothing. He lied. The gate was open when I arrived. A catering truck was parked in the circular driveway. Music and laughter drifted from the backyard. I walked around the side of the house, my military training making me move silently despite the gravel path. I wanted to surprise them. I wanted to see Mom's face light up when she saw her son home safe after all these years. What I saw instead made my blood turn to ice. The party was in full swing. 50, maybe 60 people scattered around the pool deck. Wealthy types, judging by the designer swimwear and the bottles of Dom Perignon, and moving among them, carrying trays of canapés and refilling champagne flutes, was my mother. She was 78 years old. She wore a black and white maid's uniform that hung off her thin frame. Her hair, which used to be thick and silver, was now sparse and gray, pulled back in a severe bun. Her hands shook as she carried the heavy tray. I watched her nearly drop it, watched her apologize profusely to a woman young enough to be her granddaughter. I stood frozen behind a palm tree, unable to process what I was seeing. This was my mother, the woman who worked 2 jobs to keep me in school, the woman who never missed one of my football games, even when she was dead on her feet from exhaustion. And now she was serving drinks to strangers in the house I bought to honor her. I watched a man snap his fingers at her. "Hey, you, more ice." She hurried to comply, her movements stiff with arthritis I didn't know she had. Then I saw him, my brother Daniel. He was lounging on one of the deck chairs I'd had custom made from Italian teak. He wore designer swim trunks and aviator sunglasses, a Cuban cigar in one hand and a crystal tumbler in the other. Next to him was Jessica, his wife, stretched out like a cat in a bikini that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Daniel was laughing. He was holding court, telling some story that had his guests in stitches. He looked prosperous. He looked comfortable. He looked like the lord of a manor. My mother walked past him, struggling with a heavy cooler. He didn't even glance at her. She might as well have been furniture. I felt something crack inside my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had the first time I saw a child killed by a suicide bomber. The same feeling I'd had when I held my dying teammate in my arms while we waited for medevac. It was rage and grief, and a terrible, cold clarity. I could have walked out there. I could have grabbed Daniel by the throat and thrown him into that infinity pool. But 12 years of tactical operations had taught me patience. I had learned to wait for the perfect shot. I had learned that the best revenge is the kind that destroys your enemy completely, not just temporarily. I needed to understand what had happened. I needed evidence. I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal before I made my move. So I did what SEALs do best. I conducted reconnaissance. I left the property and drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. I opened my encrypted laptop and started digging. Within an hour, I had accessed county property records, tax filings, and court documents. What I found made me want to put my fist through the screen. The house was no longer in my mother's name. It had been transferred to Daniel 6 years ago, according to a deed that bore her signature. But I knew my mother's signature. I'd seen it on every birthday card she'd ever sent me. The one on this document was close, but not quite right. The loop on the E was wrong. The slant was too steep. I dug deeper. I found that Daniel had been declared the legal guardian of Emma Reed 3 years ago, citing her diminished mental capacity and inability to manage her affairs. There was a doctor's report claiming she had early-stage dementia. The doctor's name was Richard Kelly, and a quick search showed he'd been sued for fraud twice and had his license suspended once. I found bank statements. My mother's accounts had been drained. The monthly deposits I'd been making for 12 years, $20,000 every month wired from my offshore accounts, had been rerouted to Daniel's personal accounts starting 6 years ago. That was $240,000 a year. Nearly $1.5 million total. But the worst discovery came when I searched for life insurance policies. I'd taken out a $10 million policy on myself before my first deployment, with my mother as the sole beneficiary. It was standard practice for guys like me. If you don't come back, at least your family is taken care of. The policy showed a claim filed 8 years ago, beneficiary payout, $10 million. Recipient, Daniel Reed, as guardian and executor of Emma Reed's estate. They had declared me dead. I pulled up the claim documents. There was a death certificate, issued by some military bureaucrat I'd never heard of. Killed in action, it said. Body unrecoverable. The claim had been processed, the money paid out, and apparently my mother had never seen a dime of it. I sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours, staring at the screen, my hands gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. I thought about all the missions I'd run, all the times I'd put my life on the line. And the whole time, my brother was back home, stealing my mother's house, stealing my money, and making her work as a servant in her own home. No, not her home anymore. His home, the home he stole. I closed the laptop. I pulled out a burner phone I'd picked up at a gas station. I made 3 calls. The first was to Marcus Chen, my old team medic who'd retired to private security. I need a full surveillance package, I told him. Cameras, audio, the works. Can you have it ready by tonight? For you, Mike? I can have it ready in 2 hours. The second call was to Sarah Blackwood, a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases. She was also a Marine Corps veteran, and she owed me a favor from a situation in Kandahar that we'd both agreed never to discuss. Sarah, I said, I need you to file an emergency petition. Elder abuse, fraud, identity theft. How fast can you move? How bad is it, Mike? Bad enough that I'm considering solutions that would land me in Leavenworth. There was a pause. Give me 12 hours to review the evidence. Don't do anything stupid until I call you back. The third call was to someone who didn't have a name, at least not one I knew. He worked for a government agency that officially didn't exist. I'd saved his life in Syria. He'd told me if I ever needed anything at all, to call a certain number. I need financial records, I told him. Everything on Daniel Reed, social security number. I rattled off the information. I need to know where every dollar went. This personal? He asked. Very. You'll have it in 6 hours. I hung up. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot, watching the sun set over the Pacific. I thought about my mother, probably cleaning up after that party right now, probably washing dishes and taking out trash, probably going to sleep in whatever corner of that house Daniel had relegated her to. I thought about the oath I'd taken when I joined the SEALs, to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I'd spent 12 years fighting foreign enemies. Now it was time to deal with a domestic one. I started the engine and drove to a hardware store. I needed some tools. Marcus would bring the high-tech equipment, but I needed the basics. A good lockpick set, some contractor clothes, a clipboard, the kind of things that let you walk into any building in America without raising suspicion. Because tonight, I was going back to that house. Tonight, I was going to plant cameras in every room. And tonight, I was going to start gathering the evidence that would bury my brother so deep he'd never see sunlight again. I had spent 12 years learning how to hunt the most dangerous men in the world. Daniel was about to learn what happened when a sheepdog came home and found wolves in his den. The night air was cool when I returned to Ocean Boulevard at 2 a.m. Marcus had met me at a parking lot 5 blocks away and handed over a duffel bag full of equipment. Pinhole cameras no bigger than a shirt button, audio devices that could pick up a whisper from 50 feet away, a tablet that would let me monitor everything in real time. "These are military grade," Marcus said. "You'll get crystal clear video even in low light. Battery life is 6 months. And Mike," he gripped my shoulder, "whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. I don't want to visit you in prison." "It'll be legal," I promised. Barely. I approached the house from the beach side, scaling the low wall that separated the property from the public access path. The party was long over. The lights were off except for a dim glow from what I knew was the kitchen. Someone was still awake. I moved silently across the lawn, my movements automatic from decades of training. I reached the kitchen window and peered inside. My mother was there, hunched over the sink, washing dishes. She wore a threadbare nightgown. Her feet were bare on the tile floor. She was crying silently, tears running down her weathered face as she scrubbed a champagne flute. I wanted to break down the door. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and tell her I was here, that everything would be okay. But I forced myself to stay still. If I revealed myself now, Daniel would lawyer up, destroy evidence, maybe even hurt her to keep her quiet. I needed overwhelming proof. I needed to catch him in the act of something so heinous that no amount of money or lawyers could save him. So I watched. I watched my mother finish the dishes. I watched her dry them and put them away with shaking hands. I watched her turn off the light and shuffle toward the back of the house. Not upstairs, where the master bedroom was. Not to any of the 4 guest rooms I'd furnished with expensive beds and artwork. She went to a door off the utility room, opened it, and descended a set of narrow stairs. The basement. They had my mother living in the basement. I waited until I was sure she was asleep. Then I went to work. I picked the lock on the back door, a skill the Navy had taught me for very different purposes. Inside, the house smelled wrong. It didn't smell like my mother's cooking or her lavender soap. It smelled like expensive cologne and wine and the particular brand of decay that comes from spiritual rot. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, placing cameras in air vents, behind picture frames, inside the decorative succulents Jessica favored. I placed audio devices in the chandelier above the dining room table, in the living room, near where I'd seen Daniel lounging, and in the master bedroom. The master bedroom was an abomination. My mother's furniture, the antique pieces she'd inherited from her own mother, were gone. In their place was modern minimalist garbage that probably cost a fortune and had zero soul. The walk-in closet, which I'd designed for my mother's modest wardrobe, was crammed with Jessica's designer clothes, tags still on half of them. I placed a camera in the smoke detector and moved on. The basement was the worst. I had designed it as an entertainment room, wine cellar, maybe a home gym. It had good bones, good light, good ventilation. Daniel had turned it into a cell. My mother's room was a corner sectioned off with cheap drywall. Inside was a twin bed with a thin mattress, a small dresser, and a lamp. That was it. No windows, no decorations, no bathroom, just a door that led to a tiny utility toilet and sink. The water-stained ceiling had a crack that dripped moisture. On the dresser was a photograph in a cheap plastic frame. It was me, in my dress blues, from my graduation from SEAL training 28 years ago. Young, proud, full of idealism. Next to it was my Purple Heart, the one I'd mailed home from Germany after I got hit with shrapnel. She had kept them. Even after they told her I was dead. Even after they took everything from her. She had kept these 2 items. I placed a camera in the heating vent and left. By 4 a.m., I was back in my rental car, tablet in hand, watching the feeds come online one by one. Crystal clear video. Perfect audio. I had eyes and ears in every important room in the house. Now I waited. Now I watched. And what I saw over the next 48 hours made me understand why combat veterans sometimes snap and do terrible things. I watched my brother order my mother around like a dog. "Emma, I told you to use the polish on the silver, not the regular cleaner. Do you want to ruin it? It's worth more than you'll ever be." I watched Jessica throw a full cup of coffee at my mother because it wasn't hot enough. The ceramic mug shattered against the kitchen tile. "Clean it up," Jessica said, not even looking up from her phone, "and make me a new one. Actually hot this time, not lukewarm like the swill you usually serve." My mother got on her hands and knees and picked up the broken pieces, her fingers bleeding from the sharp edges. I watched Daniel host another party. Smaller this time, just a dozen friends. Someone made a joke about the help and asked where Daniel found her. He laughed and said, "Believe it or not, she came with the house. Previous owner's mother, or something. I kept her on out of charity. She's slow, but she works cheap. Previous owner. As if I had never existed. As if I were just some stranger who used to live there. I watched my mother serve them dinner, a meal she'd spent 6 hours preparing. Not one person thanked her. When she tripped and spilled wine on the tablecloth, Daniel erupted. He grabbed her arm so hard she cried out, and he shoved her toward the kitchen. "You stupid old woman. That's Italian linen. Do you have any idea what that costs? It comes out of your food budget." Food budget. I later learned that Daniel gave her $40 a week for food. $40. In one of the most expensive cities in America. She was eating rice and canned beans while they gorged on Japanese Wagyu and French wine. But the moment that made me nearly break cover came on the third night of surveillance. I watched Jessica come downstairs to the basement, drunk from whatever expensive cocktail she'd been nursing all evening. She stood in the doorway of my mother's room. "You know what I think, Emma," Jessica said, her words slurred. "I think you're faking it. I think you remember everything. I think you're playing up this dementia act to get sympathy." My mother, sitting on her bed in her nightgown, looked up with confused eyes. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I don't understand." "Don't you dare call me Jessica. It's Mrs. Reed to you." Jessica walked closer. "Daniel is too soft on you. He lets you live here rent-free, gives you food, gives you work, so you have something to do with your pathetic life. And how do you repay us? By making mistakes. By embarrassing us in front of our friends." "I try my best," my mother whispered. "I'm sorry if I'm not good enough." "You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough." Jessica looked around the bare room with disgust. "This is better than you deserve, you know. Daniel wanted to put you in a state home, one of those places where they park old people and forget about them. But I convinced him to keep you here, so show some gratitude." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Thank you for your kindness." Jessica laughed, cold and sharp. "Kindness. That's rich." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Emma? If you ever mention Michael again, if you ever talk about your dead son to anyone, I'll make sure Daniel follows through on that nursing home threat. Understand?" "I understand." "Good." Jessica climbed the stairs and slammed the door. I heard the lock click. They were locking her in at night. I sat in my rental car, shaking with rage so intense I thought I might black out. I had killed men for less than what I just witnessed. I had ended lives for following orders that did less damage than what my brother was doing to our mother every single day. But I forced myself to breathe, to think tactically, to remember that the mission wasn't complete. I still needed more. I needed the financial evidence. I needed to understand the full scope of the fraud. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my contact at the agency, 3 encrypted files. I downloaded them and started reading. The first file was Daniel's bank records. I traced the $10 million insurance payout. He'd put $2 million into a legitimate investment account, probably to avoid suspicion. The rest had been laundered through a series of shell companies. Luxury cars purchased and immediately sold. Art bought at inflated prices from galleries that existed only on paper. Real estate flips that never actually happened. $5 million had been converted to gold and stored in a private vault in Las Vegas. $2 million had been spent on his lifestyle, cars, trips to Europe, memberships at exclusive clubs. The remaining million had simply vanished into cryptocurrency wallets I'd need a supercomputer to track. The second file was property records. Daniel had been busy. He'd transferred the La Jolla house to an LLC he controlled. He'd used my mother's identity to take out a reverse mortgage on her childhood home in Oregon, then pocketed the money and let the bank foreclose. He'd opened credit cards in her name and maxed them out. Her credit score was destroyed. She would never be able to rent an apartment or get a loan. The third file was medical records. I read through Dr. Kelly's notes with growing horror. The dementia diagnosis was fabricated, based on a single appointment where Daniel had accompanied my mother and answered all the questions for her. Patient demonstrates confusion and memory loss, the report said. Unable to recall basic information without assistance from family member. It was a setup. Daniel had coached her, probably threatened her, definitely manipulated the situation to get a diagnosis that would let him take control of her affairs. But there was more. I found records from her actual doctor, a Dr. Sarah Martinez at the VA hospital. My mother had been seeing Dr. Martinez for 10 years. The notes were detailed and clear. Patient is sharp, engaged, no signs of cognitive decline. Discussed current events, remembered detailed family history, demonstrated excellent recall. The last appointment was 6 years ago, right before Daniel got the Guardian papers. After that, nothing. He'd cut her off from her real doctor and only took her to the complicit Dr. Kelly when he needed documentation. I had everything I needed: financial fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, insurance fraud. But I wanted more. I wanted to catch him in the act of something that would put him away for decades, not just a few years. So I set a trap. I created a fake persona, Robert Halverson, real estate developer from Seattle. I had Marcus create a website, business cards, the works. Then I called Daniel's cell phone, the number I'd found in the property records. "Mr. Reed," I said, pitching my voice slightly higher, adding a hint of Pacific Northwest accent. "My name is Robert Halverson. I'm a developer looking at properties in La Jolla. Your house came up in my search, and I'm wondering if you've ever considered selling." I could hear the wheels turning in his head. "The house isn't on the market. I understand that. But I'm prepared to make an offer significantly above market value. I'm talking cash, quick close, no contingencies. Would you be willing to meet?" "How much above market?" "I'm thinking in the range of 9.5 million. Silence. The house was worth maybe 7 million in the current market. I was offering him 2.5 million in profit. "When can we meet?" Daniel asked. "Tomorrow, noon. I'll come to the property." "I'll see you then, Mr. Halverson." I hung up and smiled. It was the same smile I'd worn the moment before a raid, the smile that my team used to joke about. "Reed's got his murder face on," they'd say. "Someone's about to have a very bad day." The next morning, I watched on the cameras as Daniel went into a frenzy. He yelled at my mother to clean every surface, polish every fixture, make the house look perfect. "We have an important visitor. If you embarrass me, you'll regret it." She worked all morning, moving slowly but thoroughly. I watched her dust the chandelier standing on a ladder that wobbled dangerously. I watched her scrub the floors until her back was bent with pain. Daniel didn't help. He spent his time getting dressed in an expensive suit, rehearsing his pitch in the mirror. At 11:30, he told her to disappear. "Go to your room. Lock the door. I don't want the buyer to see you. You'll kill the deal." She obeyed without question, descending to the basement like a ghost. At noon, I rang the doorbell. I wore a tailored suit, carried a leather briefcase, looked every inch the successful developer. Daniel opened the door with a smile that reminded me why I'd never liked him, even as kids. "Mr. Halverson, please, come in." "Beautiful property," I said, looking around. "Just beautiful. I can see why you love it here." "It's been in my family for years," Daniel lied smoothly. "But you know how it is. Time to downsize. Enjoy a different phase of life." We walked through the house. He showed me every room, spinning elaborate lies about the history, the renovations, the priceless artwork he'd hung on the walls. I nodded and took notes on an iPad, playing the role perfectly. "There's just one thing," I said as we finished the tour. "The county records show a discrepancy. The property was originally purchased by a Michael Reed. Are you related?" Daniel's face flickered, just for a moment. Then the smile returned. My brother. He died years ago, sadly. Military. I inherited the property as next of kin. I'm sorry for your loss, I said. Was he in Iraq? Afghanistan? Both, actually. Hell of a soldier. Died a hero. He said it so smoothly, with such false sincerity, that I wanted to break his jaw right there. Well, I said, I think we can move forward. I'd need to do some due diligence, of course. Title search, inspection, that sort of thing. But I'm prepared to write you a check for $1 million today as earnest money. His eyes gleamed. That's very generous. I have one condition, I said. I need to see the basement. The listing photos online didn't show it, and I want to make sure there's no water damage or foundation issues. Of course, Daniel said. Though I should warn you, we use it for storage. It's a bit cluttered. We walked downstairs. I saw my mother's door, closed tight. Daniel led me to the other side of the basement, showing me the water heater, the electrical panel, talking fast about how everything was recently upgraded and to code. I wandered over to the corner where my mother's room was. I tried the door handle. Locked. What's in here? Just storage, Daniel said quickly. Old furniture, boxes, nothing important. I'd like to see it. I don't have the key on me. I pulled a lockpick from my pocket. I've got tools. Mr. Halverson, I really don't think. I picked the lock in 3 seconds and opened the door. My mother was sitting on the bed, staring at her hands. She looked up when the door opened, fear in her eyes. Then she saw me, really saw me, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or just confusion at seeing a stranger. Who is this? I asked Daniel, my voice still calm, still playing the role. She's the housekeeper. She lives on site. In the basement? With no windows? No proper bathroom? It's temporary, Daniel said. She prefers it down here, quiet. I walked into the room. I looked at my mother. She was so thin, so fragile, so utterly broken. Ma'am, I said gently. What's your name? Emma, she whispered. Emma Reed. Reed? I looked at Daniel. Same last name as you? Coincidence. Common name. I turned back to my mother. Emma, how long have you lived here? She looked at Daniel, seeking permission to speak. He gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. I don't remember, she said. I pulled out my phone. I brought up a photo, one I'd downloaded from the county assessor's website. It was the property deed, with my name on it. Emma, do you know this person? Michael Reed? Her eyes filled with tears. My son, my Michael. But they told me he's gone. Who told you? Daniel. He said Michael died. In the war. I looked at Daniel. His face had gone pale. He was starting to understand that something was very wrong. That's enough, he said. Mr. Halverson, I think you should leave. I ignored him. I kept my eyes on my mother. Emma, what if I told you Michael isn't dead? What if I told you he's alive? Don't listen to him, Emma, Daniel said sharply. He's confused. He doesn't know what he's talking about. My mother's hands were shaking. If Michael were alive, he would come home. He would come, get me. I reached up and pulled off the fake glasses I'd been wearing. I ran a hand through my hair, pushing it back the way I used to wear it. I let my posture change, let my voice drop to its natural register. I am home, Mom. She stared at me. I watched her mind work, watched her process the face, the voice, the eyes. I watched 12 years of lies begin to crumble. Michael, she whispered. It's me, Mom. She stood up, her legs shaking. She took a step toward me, reaching out with trembling hands to touch my face. My boy, my Michael. They said you were dead. I'm not dead. I'm here. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her, feeling how light she was, how fragile. I looked over her shoulder at Daniel. He was backing toward the door. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain. You declared me dead, I said, my voice dead calm. You collected my life insurance. You stole this house. You enslaved our mother. I was protecting her. She was confused. She needed help. You locked her in a basement. You weren't here. You abandoned us. I was serving my country. I sent money every month. Money you stole. Daniel reached for his phone. I moved faster. Muscle memory from 1,000 combat situations. I had his wrist twisted behind his back and his phone on the floor before he could dial. "Let me go," he screamed. "I'll call the police." "Please do," I said, "because they're already on their way." As if on cue, I heard sirens in the distance. Getting closer. I had called Sarah Blackwood before coming to the house. She'd called the police, the DA, and Adult Protective Services. They were coming with a warrant, with medical personnel, with the full force of the law. Daniel tried to pull away. I let him go, and he stumbled backward. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine." "Actually," I said, pulling out my tablet, "it's your word against this." I played him the footage, 3 days' worth of abuse, condensed into a 10-minute highlight reel, him shoving our mother, Jessica throwing the coffee cup, the locked basement door, the conversation where he called her worthless. I played the audio of Jessica threatening to send Mom to a nursing home if she ever mentioned my name. I played the video of him telling his friends I was the previous owner, some stranger who didn't matter. With each clip, Daniel's face grew paler. He sank onto the basement steps, his head in his hands. "Where's Jessica?" I asked. "Upstairs. Asleep." The sirens were right outside now. I heard car doors slamming. Voices. "Michael?" My mother was still holding on to me, afraid I might disappear. "Is this real? Are you really here?" "I'm really here, Mom. And I'm never leaving you again." Police came down the stairs first, followed by Sarah in her sharp suit, followed by 2 paramedics with a stretcher. "Mr. Reed?" one of the officers asked, looking at me. "That's me. Officer, this is my mother, Emma Reed. She's been held here against her will. She needs medical attention." Daniel stood up. "That's insane. I'm her legal guardian. I have papers." "Forged papers," Sarah interrupted. "Based on a fraudulent medical diagnosis. We have warrants for your arrest, Mr. Reed. Insurance fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, embezzlement. Shall I continue?" More officers came down. They put handcuffs on Daniel as Sarah read him his rights. He was crying now, pleading, "Mike, please. I'm your brother. We can work this out." I looked at him. This man who I'd played with as kids, who I'd protected from bullies, who I'd trusted to take care of the one person who mattered most to me. "You stopped being my brother the day you locked our mother in a basement," I said. "Now you're just a criminal." They took him upstairs. I heard Jessica screaming, heard the officers telling her she was under arrest too, heard her threats, her denials, her hysterical sobs. The paramedics checked my mother. "Malnutrition," they said. "Dehydration. Probably some broken ribs that had healed wrong." They wanted to take her to the hospital. "I'll ride with her," I said. At the hospital, they ran tests. So many tests. They confirmed she had no dementia, no cognitive decline. Her memory was perfect. She remembered everything Daniel had done, every humiliation, every threat. She'd just been too terrified and too isolated to get help. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked her as we sat in her hospital room. "They told me you were dead, honey. They showed me papers, a death certificate. They said you died in Afghanistan." "I was in Afghanistan," I said. "But I didn't die. When you didn't come home, when years went by and you didn't write or call, I thought maybe it was true." Tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you. I was on Black Ops, Mom. Deep cover. I couldn't make contact. I thought you were safe. I thought Daniel was taking care of you." She squeezed my hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." Over the next week, the full scope of Daniel and Jessica's crimes came to light. The DA was building a case that would put them away for 20 years minimum. The insurance company wanted their $10 million back, plus penalties. The IRS was looking at tax fraud. Adult Protective Services had documented enough abuse to file their own charges. Sarah Blackwood worked her magic with the court. The fraudulent guardianship was dissolved. Daniel's power of attorney was revoked. The house deed was challenged and overturned. Everything that was taken was being returned. But there was one more surprise waiting for us. I sat with my mother in the hospital room, when my mysterious contact sent me one final file. It was a cryptocurrency wallet, one that Daniel didn't know about. I'd opened it 15 years ago, right when Bitcoin was just starting. I'd put $50,000 into it as an experiment and forgotten about it. That $50,000 was now worth $83 million. I showed my mother the number on my laptop screen. She stared at it, not quite comprehending. "This is yours," I said. "All of it." "Michael, I can't." "You can. You will. You're going to buy yourself a new house, anywhere you want, and you're never going to worry about money again," she cried. Happy tears this time. A month later, we stood on the deck of her new home. Not the La Jolla mansion, which I'd sold immediately. She didn't want it, didn't want the memories. Instead, we bought a smaller but beautiful craftsman in Coronado, right on the bay. 3 bedrooms, a garden, neighbors, who brought casseroles and welcomed her warmly. Daniel and Jessica were in custody, awaiting trial. Their assets had been seized. They would spend the next 2 decades in prison, and when they got out, they'd be penniless and unemployable. Dr. Kelly had lost his medical license permanently. He was facing his own criminal charges. Mom had gained back 15 pounds. The color had returned to her face. She was seeing a therapist, working through the trauma. But mostly, she was healing. "I still can't believe you're here," she said as we watched the sun set over the water. "Believe it, Mom. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm retired now. No more deployments. What will you do?" I thought about it. Maybe I'll write a book. How to Destroy Your Enemies, using the legal system. Could be a bestseller. She laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her really laugh in years. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the boats in the harbor, listening to the gulls. I'd spent 12 years fighting terrorists, dictators, and fanatics. I'd learned that the worst enemies aren't always the ones shooting at you. Sometimes they're the ones who smile to your face while they destroy everything you love. But I'd also learned that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never denied. Not when you have the patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Daniel had gambled that I was dead, that I'd never come home, that he could steal with impunity. He'd forgotten the first rule of warfare: never leave an enemy alive behind you. He'd left me alive, and I'd come home. The sunset turned the water gold. My mother reached over and took my hand. "Thank you, son." "For what?" "For coming back. For fighting for me. For being my hero." I squeezed her hand. "You raised a seal, Mom. We never leave anyone behind, especially not family." We sat there until the stars came out, 2 survivors of different kinds of wars, finally home and finally at peace.